what's your knowledge right now of where some of the storage research is, and what the possibility of commercial influence might be coming up in the future?
This is an area I share your view. Like everything is all about the storage. If we could store electricity in a reasonable way, in a durable sort of a fashion, using common materials, like we can't have any super exotic capacitors that require really exotic materials because at scale, we would need to build. We would have to be able to build these things literally so they could go almost in every home or at least in every municipality. They would have to be all over the place. I don't think it's possible to have one giant centralized battery, just given the nature of how batteries operate. But this is an area where I continually am excited by the lab demonstrations or the small scale demonstrations, maybe the Bloom device, which I believe is a fuel cell, right? Isn't that actually running on hydrogen? So we'd still have to find a way to master the hydrogen cycle. But we keep having these sort of breakthroughs, and then they don't really go anywhere. And I've been waiting for years and years. I'll note that the battery in my car is fundamentally almost exactly the same as the one Volta invented in the late 1700s or whenever he was around. It just hasn't changed. So here's the thing. We have about $2 billion in our national budget for 2013 earmarked towards what I'll call renewable energy initiatives. $2 billion. Of which I think about $500 million of that is dedicated towards fuel cell research. But I couldn't detect anything in there which was just generally dedicated towards, at the national level, towards coming up with the next generation of batteries. We're kind of leaving that to industry. And industry's working hard to try and solve it. And yet I liked your term of a Manhattan Project earlier, because I think what we really need is a Manhattan Project times an Apollo project times some other number to really solve this. And this is where we could... can you hear me? Yep, okay. So this is where I would love to see us dedicate something that's reasonable at the national level. I think there's a role for government, even if they put up a prize, right? I love the story of the X Prize, where some private people put up $10 million to get into space. I mean, compare that to NASA's tens of billions, right? And what a silly thing. And it got done, because what happened was over $100 million of private money chased that $10 million prize. It was this 10-to-1 leverage. I would love to see us just even take, so the Fed's printing $85 billion a month out of thin air to keep things running. Heck, let's take 1/85th of that, right? Let's take $1 billion, toss it out, call it a prize, say for anybody who can solve the energy storage problem at this density using common materials wins $1 billion. And we might get 10 billion or 100 billion, chasing that to see if they could win that prize. There's a lot we could be doing, but we're not yet. And I want to contrast this. China has dedicated $80 billion a year for the next 10 years towards alternative energies. They have very ambitious goals. They want to be number one in just about everything, wind, solar, you name it. They've got a very aggressive program chasing thorium as a very exciting potential, very, very long-term kind of huge energy source. It's potential there. And the frustrating part is the United States actually developed the first thorium reactors back in the late 50s, early 60s, and then we dropped it. Cynically, I'll tell you it's because thorium reactors are crappy at doing something. They don't turn out bomb-grade fissile material. They turn out rather useless stuff, and so they weren't useful to our military side of the equation, so we stopped pursuing them. But there are lots of things that we could be doing, lots of things we could be pursuing, and we're not doing them. And so you take our $2 billion a year in the U.S., you put that up against China's $80 billion, and it's just, you can tell who's being rather more serious about this at this stage. So we're not serious yet, and that's really where my work comes down, is I'm trying to articulate this condition that we're in, predicament some would say, in such a way that we go, hey, wait a minute, why aren't we doing stuff that's just smart? I mean, what Rifkin's talking about, there's a lot of things in Amory Lovin's, like they talk about how we can build buildings today with existing technology in a cost-efficient way that use a fraction of the energy of traditional architecture and building styles. And we don't. Why not? There's no good, compelling reason why not, at least economically or environmentally or even politically that I can think of.
Okay, we got students that have some questions, and let's transfer to them.
I had a question about what your thoughts are on carbon capture, because it seems like if we use our resources twice, that would make a lot more sense.
What do you mean using resources twice?
Well, capturing uh, coal fumes from coal-fired plants, capturing them with algae, creating a biofuel with the algae from the fumes, the carbon from the coal-fired coal plants, basically, and ultimately getting to a point where the pollution from engine of a car is used over. Is there anybody out there working on
Well, the carbon capture and storage is a great idea. Typically, right now, it just means you take the effluent from the stacks and you inject it very deep down into the ground, never to be seen again, hopefully. There's very, like, we don't have any algae systems running even at what I'll call the pilot plant level yet, where you could feed in like a constant stream of carbon dioxide coming out of a smokestack and have that be used twice, as it were, in that scenario. So most carbon capture and storage is just simply capturing it and injecting it deeply. It adds to the cost of your fuel at that point in time because there's a certain amount of energy required to inject, capture, and inject the carbon. And so we could do that, but it's going to cost us, in some cases, quite a lot. Not all locations are suitable for carbon storage at this point in time. So there would be some places that are, some aren't. Not everybody's got an ultra deep injection well system nearby a coal plant that they can utilize. So it's possible, but when I look at the idea that there are 1,200 coal-fired plants on the drawing boards to go in the next several years, it really feels to me like the race is going in the wrong direction at this point in time. And to really change it, we're going to have a very different discussion nationally and globally. We have to either decide we're going to get serious about this or not. And if we are going to get serious, we have to understand there will be huge costs associated with that. We will be dedicating a portion of our energy towards mitigating and ameliorating the difficulties that come with energy rather than using that in some other part of the economy. And you can't predict in a complex system what's going to change or shift or go away or even amplify when you make changes to it. We don't know, but the general idea would be there will be more and more of our efforts going to be dedicated towards the simple things in life: food, fuel, water, having an environment that's at least livable and not degrading on us or falling apart, instead of all the other things that we've chosen to do. So it's just a quick way of saying, I'm with you. I would advocate for that. And we have to understand that as a society, we're going to be prioritizing putting more of our effort towards these sort of fundamental things and less towards these, what I'll call discretionary or frivolous things. So, travel takes a hit, or, a lot of the service economy doesn't make sense because we need more people doing things on the production and management side and operational side rather than on the service side. And that's a really big part of the conversation. And we're not having it right now. And editorially, I'll say it's because our messaging is controlled by people who have an interest in making sure that one message gets out and not another. 40% of our economy in the United States is what we call the financial economy. And then I'll be generous. The financial economy doesn't produce anything. It rather consumes. And you can't have 40% of your economy just consuming when you're starting to run out of things to consume. Eventually, we have to rationalize that and say, how much of our country was financialized back when we were in our industrial phase? Well, it was about 10%. Wow, what are we going to do? We'd have to take 30% of our economy and shift it back towards production, away from paper shuffling. And that's not a conversation we're even remotely having at this point in time yet. Rather, that it's a big trend that needs to happen. It will happen. But if my guess is correct, we're going to do it after so forced to by circumstances in this country rather than proactively.